Hello, and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We talk everything animation here, including Primal, which we'll be talking about tonight. I'm your host, Bonilla, and today I'm joined by April Collins.
Hi there!
And Sarah Potter.
Hello!
Today we are discussing the first 5 episodes of Primal that have aired on Adult Swim recently. You can find more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can also subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app by searching for Overly Animated. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/overlyanimated. But yeah, we are talking about the 5 episodes of Primal that aired over early October, titled Spear and Fang, River of Snakes, A Cold Death, Terror Under the Blood Moon, and Rage of the Ape Men. This is the latest project of Genndy Tartakovsky, animation veteran, who we have covered previously on this podcast with Samurai Jack. He's also done Dexter's Laboratory, Symbiotic Titan, the Hotel Transylvania film series. So he's got a lot of projects under his belt, and this is the latest one. And it's a unique project that we will talk about. Spoilers for the full season. Also, this is a not safe for work podcast, as evidenced by the subject matter. So we may let off some cursing, I don't know. But yeah, so just with those warnings in place, we'll start with the general thoughts about how you're feeling after the 5 episodes. April, let's go to you first. How are you feeling in general about Primal? What are your initial reactions?
So, initial reactions, I'm a little bit more into this than I thought I was going to be. Cause, all of Genndy's previous works I was a huge fan of, especially Samurai Jack. I loved Samurai Jack. And I knew that this was going to be different, and because of that, I was worried that I wouldn't like it. But I ended up really, really enjoying it. It's so well animated, and I love that there's essentially no dialogue throughout the entire thing. And it tugged in my emotions in ways that I didn't think that it necessarily could, especially towards the end. But yeah, I was really, really impressed. It appropriately aired on Adult Swim, which is good, evidenced by the first episode alone. Despite the fact that there's, no sex, cursing, or, any of that. There's just a lot of extreme violence. So, I guess just my initial thought is I'm overwhelmingly impressed.
Nice. Okay. High praise to start off. Thank you, April. Sarah, how about you? How do you feel about Primal?
So I like pretty much all of Genndy's stuff. I watched I loved Samurai Jack. I loved his Clone Wars series, the Star Wars series he worked on, not the 3D CG one, the 2D animated one, which was really cool. But this is kind of, I think this is the stuff that Genndy does that I like less. I really enjoyed this show, but I really enjoyed the really hyper stylized nature of Samurai Jack. The episodes of Samurai Jack I remember the best are the ones where they really go into the abstract the most. That episode where it was the white and black warrior and the sun and the shadows, and they were disappearing and appearing in the light and darkness, and it's just really out there. And there's not as much of that in this season. It's very much just gore, and there is emotion there, and there's real emotion between the characters, and I felt that, but I never really got connected to the kind of artsy fight styles that Genndy usually has. This is more just, if you're not connected to Fang and Spear, you're not gonna get this show, I don't think.
Well, yeah, I think that's a point to make, and I think that the fact that there's no dialogue kind of means it's hinged entirely on the fact that you gotta have a connection to either the style or the characters, but one or the other is important.
But I mean, in this show, I think what I'm trying to say is this show, it's not realistic, quote unquote, but it's more just that there's not that abstractness that he gets in his other works, I don't think. And I kind of like his abstractness. I like when things get a little weird and unclear of what's actually happening. But this shows there's actually kind of set rules. There's physics don't get really warped to make something look better or different. It's just the closest we got to it was the scene with the velociraptors when the shadows kind of stretched towards them as they were like menacing and moving towards them in that circle at the end of the chase. Like I really like stuff like that where like he stretches animation to make it look different than it actually is to give a feeling. And I really love what Genndy does with that. And there was a little bit less of that in this series, but it was still good. It's just not what I usually expect from him, I guess is the way to put it.
Okay. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about realism and how that affects the show. I will just say my general reactions is I quite enjoyed this series, although my major thought while going in is like, how does this exist? Because I mean, obviously, the reason it exists is because Genndy is such a unique personality in the animation industry that he gets trust that no other animator really is able to get after so many projects. So he can just be like, hey, I'm gonna do like a violent, no dialogue caveman series, and Adult Swim was like, fine, sure, like we trust you to do it. And like almost nobody else I think would get that kind of latitude, and so this exists. So like that's like my main thought, just like, wow, like this kind of animation is being allowed to air like as a series. But as for the show itself, I think that it is definitely captivating. I would agree with April that it does do well with the making connections to Spear and Fang, and so by the end, it is able to pull some emotional strings, which is considered more impressive in that there's no dialogue. Like it's all done physically, and there's a lot of there's just movement all over the place. It also at the same time does take its moments of silence. It kind of reminded me of Ghibli films in that sense, where it was okay sometimes just letting things be quiet for a while and just letting stuff. There's not a need for things to be moving in action all the time. So I enjoyed the balance that they struck with it. And the creature designs in general were pretty interesting, especially I'd say episode the one with the bats was very good in terms of designing, using your setting of prehistoric times to the best use possible, like combining it with the medium of animation. So I think that this is a very solid thing. If I have a gripe, it's that the stories themselves are a little bit simple, and you can usually predict where it's heading from the beginning of the episode. But I think that it's executed well enough that like you're fine watching it through, even if you know where it's going to end up. But you still enjoy watching the action that gets you there. So yeah, for Primal, good show.
I actually think the episodes that are most straightforward in like what's going to happen in the episode are the best. Like just like the ones where you clearly have a through line of what the emotion you're supposed to be feeling is. Like I think like the first episode is maybe, it's easy to say that might be the best episode because the emotion there is very easy to understand, and you don't have this complex story. It's just lose family, fight for revenge, and like it's just that emotion and nothing else. And I think that's just easy to get across with no dialogue, or easier.
Yeah, that's fair. That first episode, especially. I was thinking more of the second episode where it begins with the dinosaur and Spear fighting over who's gonna hunt, and they're gonna figure out how to hunt together. We just gotta watch them like stumble through. I
think that episode suffers because it's going to happen from like the first minute. Episode 1, you don't know what's going to happen until like a few minutes in. Like it gives you time to sit on the setting a little bit. This second episode kind of like shows its hand like right away, and I think that's really frustrating.
But in general, I think it does a good job of taking you through beat by beat. April, how do you feel about the storytelling that this show was doing?
I was comfortable. I mean, I felt like it was pretty, almost kind of straightforward, like you kind of said, in terms of like, because it's hard to really tell a story without dialogue. And so even though I guess the story is kind of plain and simple. It was executed very well, despite the fact that there was no like dialogue. I really liked there was at least like noise, so you could kind of understand a little bit more as to like what the characters were feeling. But I think with the animation, like it was so very well done that you could pick up what the characters were feeling well and as well. So I liked the story. I was very compelled by it. I mean, I won't lie. In the last episode, like I was like tearing up, which was extremely embarrassing because I was at work. But so they're like, April, why are you crying? And I'm like, shut up.
Work is just so hard.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not a bitch. I'm not crying over this, but like, but I was like, I felt very compelled by it. Even like the first episode, it kind of like knocks you like right away because you kind of knew like what like the story was going to be centered around, but you didn't necessarily know how you were going to get there. Like I was not expecting for, not just baby dinosaurs, but baby people to die and like
baby people.
Or baby, I guess, cave people, were, going to be eaten and that they were going to show it nonetheless too. And like, I knew it was on Adult Swim, but like, I was not prepared for that. And I had like a lot of that, like, oh my, like, oh, okay. Like, but I guess at the same time, like, the characters, Spear and Fang would have had to go through, that type of loss in order to sort of, build their bond. It was a good basis for it.
Yeah. It's definitely a classic way to get two characters together. We have both lost our families, so all we've got is each other.
Classic.
It's a classic move, but it I mean, seeing anybody's family gone is sad, and I think that they express pretty well with Spear in the beginning of this first episode, like how broken he already is. There's that moment where like after they show us the flashback of like the woman and kids getting eaten. He like then goes up to the cliff. There's like purple skies.
Oh,
and
that was such a powerful scene.
Yeah,
like,
it seems like he's thinking about walking off. Like,
definitely.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I got the right message from that.
No, because like I think the best part of that scene actually is the music, because it like crescendos up and then it just releases at the moment he leans back and sits down. Like it's just such a good musical moment too. Just like this tension rising of the music, and I forget what instrument it was, but it's definitely like I think it was a stringed instrument, and it just like and it just releases, and it's just it's so good.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, I don't know, like it's such an interesting scene to include. And like I find it like almost kind of like, I don't know, like it's unique that like you, Alex, were like, oh, like I wasn't necessarily sure what was happening in that scene. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, oh no, I picked up on that. Like he was thinking about jumping. Like, so that's like, but that's something too, because like I feel like a lot of like scenes like where a character is feeling suicidal, like it takes like the I'm going to kill myself, like I want to die, like it takes those words coming out of their mouth for you to understand like the next sort of like set of actions. But for there to be, the lack of dialogue, and then for people like I picked up on it immediately. I was like, he's gonna jump, he's thinking about it. And so
and like, as Sarah says, like the music is also doing a lot of work there, and like leading you like trying to hold your hand to get to that conclusion, right?
Right. So like just the use of music and even like ambient sound like really helps.
This show, like just talking about this, it really makes me feel like Genndy like was really just experimenting with how much you need to tell your audience more than anything, because like I think that's a big part of like anime, a big part of shows and media, like the struggle of how much do I tell, like how obvious do I need to be to make sure everyone gets it, because like there's things where like when you're doing like representation, like you need to have scenes of coming out or people just don't get it, you know what I mean, like you need to do it that way. But also there's these scenes like this scene in particular, so it's like people just don't accept that is what's happening unless someone says it. Like they're like, oh, they just feel bad, and it's just like it's not them being wrong. It's just them, or not them.
They're
reading
not
the scene.
understanding like
There's
the
not
gravity, or
they don't understand the emotions behind it, so they can't connect and like get to there. And that probably means that they've never had a moment like the one he's had, or could understand a moment like the one he's had. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means they didn't connect on the same level to it. And I think that's interesting. And I think this really shines for me most because like the end of Korra season 1, which it's been years, so sorry, spoilers for the end of season 1 of Korra.
How dare.
Yeah, but it takes like it's really hard in that episode to like realize that like Korra almost commits suicide at the end, and people I talk to do not realize that, and it's just like because she doesn't say it, no one says it, but she does, and it's just like it's crazy just how many things people don't. It's just crazy how people read scenes differently when there isn't dialogue. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's a good point about like. You're stripping down. This show is in the peak of stripping down the story as much as possible to get the bare bones of a story that's followable without any additional help from dialogue. Like that's an experiment, and one that I think that this show successfully does for the most part.
I think it's successful, but I think that like it's kind of a gimmick. It's like it's cool to say you did it, but I don't think you need to do it. Like I think like there's a middle ground where it's just better. Like you need something for your audience to connect to at some point, I think.
I suppose, but also at the same time, I mean, I would argue that this is the fact that it is unique, I think helps it a lot. Like I get that ideally you'd want a middle ground, but I think that there's room for this kind of stuff too, where
I think there is, but it's just like think about like the closest thing I can relate this to is like Pixar stuff because they have a lot of silent scenes in movies. Like they have a lot of silent stuff like WALL-E and Up, and like the difference there from that to this is that in those things they're able to give like a visual dialogue of things that we can relate to as people, as humans that live in this world. When WALL-E finds something that we know is a thing that we recognize from our world, we connect to that and we see that. We understand the language that's being gotten across to us. Or in Up, when they get married or when someone dies, like we connect to it. But in this thing, it's an alien world and there's barely any human-esque dialogue coming from the main characters. And it feels like it's just going to the limit just to go to that limit. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I think the experiment is flawed is probably the better way to put it. I'm saying that you don't need to do this in the first place. Like, you don't need to go this far with it.
I mean, well, April, how do you feel about this argument?
I think so it's Pixar's such an interesting, I guess, like comparison because you're almost in a sense between like WALL-E, for instance, which has very little dialogue. And so I think it's like it's on a different sort of like level because you're comparing like a children's movie to like an adult program. And so I think that kind of makes it hard because obviously like the kids movie is going to be slightly more like lighthearted. Like obviously it was a very serious subject matter in WALL-E, you know, the earth is dying and all of that stuff. But like this is also, it's taking like a different part of like, I guess the human experience and portraying it in a different way. And I think it's bold and I can see how that can be flawed because it really was a risk to take, you know, not having any dialogue, and it being an Adult Swim show, which we kind of all understand like what that sort of typical program looks like. And so it's definitely taking a risk. I think it paid off, and maybe it didn't pay off for everyone, which I can understand because sometimes people want and need and crave the dialogue, not just to understand what's going on, but just because this kind of makes me think of the movie Quiet. Is that what it's called? Quiet Place, or I don't remember.
Quiet Place. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, it kind of makes me think of, like, that. So,
But I mean, that
like,
movie had sign language with subtitles.
that's true. Or what's the movie with that John Krasinski did?
That's a quiet
place.
No, I'm thinking of two different movies.
Has
Okay,
he done two Quiet Person movies?
well, there's another one coming out, but there's also
A Quiet Place 2?
Yeah. But then there's another movie where, like, the main character, she's not only like, she's deaf and mute. So, like, it gets like, it feels really awkward.
Is it an anime?
Is this Shape of Water?
No, it's not Shape of Water.
Okay.
It's like, it's a scary movie.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, so, like, it feels really awkward because it's so quiet at times, because they put it from her perspective and you're literally just watching, like, the movie without sound almost. So it can be unsettling, and I think that in, like, media where there's always so much dialogue and sometimes too much dialogue, it can feel like unnatural to not have, characters being like, well, I'm really sad, I'm gonna jump off a cliff, or hey, let's be friends, or, you know what I mean, something along those lines. So
I'm not saying I want that. I want to be clear. Like, I'm not saying
no. But I would say that, like, it was definitely a risk that was taken, and whether or not it needed to be done, I really couldn't say, but I ended up enjoying it in the end.
Same.
Because so
I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the product. I'm saying the starting point was flawed. I'm saying that, like, I think he came at this in the wrong angle. Like, and he got a good product out of it. I just don't think the experiment was necessary, is kind of what I'm saying. I think that, like, it feels like Genndy was putting an arm behind his back just to see if he could at some points of this show, almost. I guess that's the way I want to put it. Like, it felt like there was less. It felt like he didn't do things just because he wanted to see what the show would look like. And it was cool, but there's a reason the show's only 5 episodes, I think. I think it's only 5 episodes because there's only so long you can milk this.
For the record, material before the show says that there are 10 episodes out. These are just the first 5, so there will be another 5 episodes out next year.
Okay, then I'm crazy. Like, I guess, like, okay, to be fair, like, I haven't seen the next 5 to see what he does differently. Like, this is just based on the first 5. Like, based on this first 5, like, these are all very similar, and, like, I don't know if I'd be into it if it was just 5 of this again.
Well,
if that...
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think, again, this depends on your emotional connection to it, because I would say that, like, at episode 5, there's, like, a very big marking point. Then it kind of makes sense as, like, a, quote, season finale of, like, okay, this big emotional thing happened. Now the next 5 episodes is seeing how like, the aftermath of that.
Yeah.
Person who was broken when we met him now is broken again. So what is broken?
And I'm kind of excited for that. Like, I'm excited to see, like, now that I know that, like, I'm actually kind of more excited in it. Like, I think I'm more satisfied with what I saw, because, like, the way it ended felt weird to me. Knowing that there's more makes
for sure. Like, the first time I watched it, I was also under the impression that this was it, and I was like, oh, this is a weird place to end your series. Like, this
is such a dark place.
Yeah, like, again, it's kind of a brave thing. It's like, oh, look, prehistoric times, no happy endings. This is just life for the prehistoric man, and, like, I would be okay with that, but also it's a weird place to end. But, like, knowing that there's more, it's like, okay, well, now we get to see, like, what goes on after this. That's a different thing. And just going back to the idea of this maybe not being needed, but I think that this speaks to an overall argument of, okay, like, does placing challenges on yourself lead to create more creativity or not? Like, that's kind of a philosophy thing that exists, right? That, like, some people put challenges on purpose in order to, like, find creative solutions. And I think that this show does that.
Yeah, restrictions breed creativity and all that. Like, that's a thing. Like, that's a phrase that a lot of people use and live by. Like if you're a creative person, it's easier to have a guideline than to have a blank canvas. Like, it's just easier that way. And I get that. It just feels like some guidelines are kind of unnecessary. I think there was a world where this show was different and closer to something he'd already made, and he didn't want to do that. And that's understandable. Like so many of his shows for me, like I'm not saying this in a bad way, kind of run together for me because he just has this very unique style, very distinct, and he has this very consistent like liking of this very smooth and silent protagonist. And I think he wanted to take a spin with that was just different. That wasn't this calm exterior. That was more this aggressiveness. And I think that was just something he wanted to like. It comes across like that's what he was really living in with this show. That he really wanted this aggressive male character instead of this like Samurai Jack type person.
Mm-hmm. And like the name of the show is Primal, right? So it's like kind of getting to the very very base human character as basic as possible, but
Yeah, and also I'm talking about this so much because I like this show and I like Genndy a lot. Like I'm trying to just dig down into like why this was made really, because like I'm talking like I just want to make sure that's clear. Like I really like this show, and it's just I'm trying to figure out why Genndy made it because it just doesn't really make sense to me on the outside. But I mean that's why I'm not Genndy. Like.
Well, and also like moving along with this first episode, I think that what we talk about with Pitstar, like there are things for you to latch on to that are common human experiences. I think that Genndy still manages to do that in this series, especially in this first episode with like the connection between he sees the dinosaur family and he like is hesitant because it's like, oh, okay, there's a family there, and like that's like a thing that even though dinosaurs are alien to us, but like that's still an experience that we as humans understand. So I think that's an important piece of like making this foreign setting appealing to or understanding to us, helping us to make emotional connections, even though it's stuff we don't understand.
Yeah, and I think the first episode works specifically because he actually does bring in some visual language to understand, in that I really think that the dinosaur that he befriends, Fang, is really based off cats. Like, it's really like the way that Fang acts is very cat-like, very much like seeking out warmth, very much the way his tail, or I don't know, Fang's, it's a dinosaur.
Yeah, it has a tail.
The tail goes back and forth, and like it sways.
It gets
but I
like
mean,
playful and...
Yeah, I think at the last episode, there's a moment where he's just jumping, like trying to catch the butterflies. So, like,
that's so good.
Yeah,
it has like those playful kind of like moments, even throughout like all the episodes. Like Fang has like those cute little like playful moments, and like the tail will like sway a little bit quicker whenever like it's excited, so you can like see like that excitement or whatever, the anxiousness or whatever is like taking place. So
and Fang kind of just wants to prove that they're the best. Like Fang just wants to prove that they're better than Spear at things and just be like the better hunter, and like just and I'm pretty sure Fang in episode 2 pretty much viewed it all as a game, like viewing it that like if I get more food, I'm better, and this is fun. Like this is all a challenge between us.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought of that interpretation, but
I think there is some aggressiveness, obviously, but I mean, like I think that's just what animals do. They view it. They don't necessarily see that it's like morally evil that stealing food from another person. Like they're just hunting together,
right.
And Fang is better.
And that would work off of the classic man-pet scenario that this show is using. Again, like that's something familiar to us, like how man and pets interact. And so they use that to their advantage. And so it also makes sense if we apply other of Fang's actions to how pets act. Like that makes sense. And like this first episode, and just to round out the emotional connection stuff of it, at the end also we had like Spear just walking along the beach, and then right behind him Fang follows, and we get this moment of like him Fang like laying down, like trying to prove that he's not being hostile, and Spear like figures it out slowly, and like all that again is done without any like speaking, not even any grunts really, like just the eye movements and the physical of like him holding up his spear and then slowly like laying it down. So all that is just, it's impressive in how much information it's giving of like what these two characters are thinking about each other without a single noise coming out of their mouths.
Yeah. And I think that episode 1 is just so good. It's just so good at getting all that across. It's just so succinctly. Like the scene where like I knew that like they'd get along because I'd seen promotional material for this show. Like I knew that like the dinosaur and the guy were going to get together in some way, but like that scene where they did like was actually very well done, and it was very surprising to me that it wasn't just straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of that, like the first scene where they're really together is when these giant dinosaurs come up and eat the baby dinos, and they begin fighting together. So this leads us to the other like big calling card of this show, which is the extra violence, like the fact that it's TVMA because
that.
Yeah,
just like fuck those baby dinosaurs dying. Like I was so upset by that.
Me too. I was more upset about the dinosaurs than the kids, honestly.
Wow. Well, to be fair, the kids were eaten as like shadows, but like here we saw them as real dinos, and the dinos were being cute and like were like nudging up to Spear and be like, "Hey, be our uncle," and it's like, nah.
Be our friend. Join our family. Poor baby dinos.
Yeah. So the dinos bite it here, and as a result, Spear and Fang bloody these dinosaurs up. How do you guys feel about the usage of the blood and violence in this show? Do you feel it's gratuitous? Do you feel it served its purpose? Where are you guys with it? April?
I feel like it served its purpose. I guess like in a sense, because I don't always necessarily like sort of like mindless violence, but if you kind of like take into perspective the fact that this show takes place, in a more, I guess, primal time, then that this level of violence would be sort of expected, or I guess almost kind of justified in a sense, just because like that's how you survive. Like it's not all clean cut like it is in modern times. And so I think like once I kind of got into that mindset, I felt like it served its purpose, and especially in like those moments of like loss, seeing, or even in like the moments of struggle, it sort of helped, I guess, further convey that whenever, again, a character isn't necessarily going to sit there and be like, ouch, I'm in pain, I'm bleeding, especially like, what is it, in the fifth episode, whenever, or was it the fifth? It was the episode, no, I guess it was, whenever, like, Fang gets up from something and, like, starts coughing up blood.
Yeah, that was the last episode.
Yeah, okay, that was the last episode. I was thinking, I literally watched them, like, one right after the other, so.
They kind of do blend together.
Yeah, they really do, so,
there's cooler arcs in each episode, but they're all just a lot of gore.
Yeah, but, like, again, like, I think it really, like, served its purpose and helped sort of, further convey what, we didn't have words to do, so.
Okay. Sarah, any thoughts on that?
The gore in general?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that's the topic we're still on. That's all.
Yeah.
I think the gore is like, I'm not really like someone who likes gore that much. Like I don't. It bothers me, but not in the sense that like I think that it shouldn't be done. Like I watched the show fine, and I think like the more like animation gore is a little easier for me. But the last episode specifically really like was like ugh, like with all the organs and the body's cut in half by like big ogre version of Fang with the medicine or whatever with the juice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
There's
it was
definitely like broken spines, some intestines flying around. That was like a bit more than the other episodes.
Yeah, that one went a little far for me, but the other ones I was okay with. Like I liked that, and or not like, but I dealt with it and I was fine with it. But I think the biggest thing like that you touched on, April, is that like there's this freeing from like a moral code we get with this show. Like there's no morals that the characters have to deal with because it's just like there's no laws or structure. It's just survive and get by. So Genndy is free to just have his main character be super violent and not be unsympathetic or unlikable because there isn't this moral code going on. They're all just animals and they could kill him at any moment. And I think that's for the show's positive. Because there's all like in Samurai Jack, he got away with it because everything was robots and they were all evil robots, and that worked out. Like that worked for that show. Mm-hmm. But there is that struggle with super violent shows where it's like, how do I stay like how do I stay relating to a character when they're killing everybody? Like, and I think the show succeeds at that because of just the lack of morality needed for it.
Yeah, it just really sort of helps set like, I guess, like the scene and the mood of like the time period that we're supposed to be in, or I guess like the general idea of the time period we're supposed to be in.
I mean, it's a fake time period because there's dinosaurs.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to discuss that. I mean,
the imagined time period.
Like, this is like technically fantasy because everything, like, because there's those giant spiders and giant bats and stuff, but it's also mixed with like real dinosaurs and real animals just that shouldn't have lived together. It's interesting.
That entire ape secret society in the last episode was
weird.
It's quite something, but yeah. So I would agree with it leading toward fantasy. I would just say in relation to the gore, especially in the last episode, it reminded me of Castlevania's usage of gore as well, because that one also like leans towards the organs and stuff when it decides to go there.
That's true.
So like I'm getting used to animated gore at this point, and I think that this show was solid enough. I think that seeing Spear himself bloodied up a lot like gives you a better sense of the fights that they engage in having an effect, as opposed to I mean, he's already bordering close to being like a superhero because he survives like so many falls and stuff.
Yeah.
But at least like him getting bloodied up like helps it be like, okay, well at least there's pain involved in all of this. So,
yeah, no, they're constantly getting hurt.
Yeah. So I think that in that sense it's there's purpose. I think that maybe TVMA is a little bit extreme, but the rate of people, blood, yeah. So
yeah. I mean, it could just be the MA could just be from the kids dying. Like when you put kids dying in a show like on screen, like that raises the rating a lot.
Maybe, yeah. Those baby dinos were very traumatizing. I will give them that.
Yeah, they were.
Is there a specific episode? I mean, we talked about the first episode, but of the other four, is there a specific episode that stood out to you a lot, or something very specific about the show that it highlights that you want to talk about? April?
I really, I remember really enjoying Terror Under the Blood Moon.
Oh, yeah.
I just remember being extremely captivated by the entire episode. And I don't know what it is, because I don't think that like the animation or like the art style changed, but I remember feeling like I was like watching a comic book sort of very much come alive. And I really just enjoyed like the excitement that I kind of got out of that. And I guess like I really enjoyed kind of like, you know, like the action sequences and like all of it like combined together. You know, like them escaping out of the cave was really like because I was like, well, how are you gonna get down? Like, you might as well just stay there. Like, so, and then like, you know, like he went and like, even like the giant spiders like design was really like it, you know, like it seemed like lifelike, but like to a fantasy scale. So I liked that episode a lot. So
I think that's my favorite episode.
Really?
Yeah, and I think that what I think this kind of gets into what I was saying earlier about like the fantastical elements. I think this is the best episode because it's the most fantastical. Like it's the most like absurd. There's none of this is real. None of this could have happened in any of the episode. But it's just like it has that Genndy twist to it. Like the jumping from bat to bat while killing them. Like that's so good. It's so crazy, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Like I really think this episode is just, I guess, fun. Like even just the start, we haven't mentioned like that start with the chase from the velociraptors. Like that is so good.
Like the whole sequence was so well done too. Yeah. Like because I was just like, oh, like what's going on? And then I'm like, oh no, this isn't a good situation. Like I was there for the ride.
Yeah, like this episode like starts sprinting and just goes faster through the episode, and it even like wraps up really neatly by going back to the velociraptors. And I almost thought like we're gonna end with like just looping back to the same thing. They'd run out of the field with the velociraptors chasing them still, like, and they'd run into the sunset again. Like it would just loop back on itself.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of expecting that. I was surprised they did it, but it was still really good. It was just like, I don't know. This episode was definitely my favorite. It was so good.
And they still involve the opening at the end because, like, they lead the bats into that field to get
Oh,
destroyed.
no,
by
yeah,
the
that's what I'm
diamond.
saying. Like, I was expecting they would still kill the bats, and then they'd be like, wow. They would take a breath and be calm, and then they'd realize, oh, the velociraptors are still here. They'd have to run away from them again.
Yeah.
But I think that's just me, like, wanting, like, that symmetry in the episode more than anything.
Well, it was very close. Although admittedly, the riding off into the sunset is a hard thing
Or
to
sunrise.
deny
Sorry,
yourself.
it's sunrise.
Or sunrise.
It all takes place in one night. It's sunrise.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. so that works. Yeah, I agree that like this episode is just very. Because it leans into fantasy, it helps a lot with giving it a very unique environment. It's a lot of reds and pinks being used because of Blood Moon. These bats themselves are just a very lovely design, like giant foreheads that kind of look like butts. They got really pointy. I mean, I guess they're just like bats in real life, but just it's expanded to like 3x size.
Yeah.
So that and like they're just blood red, and also you got like this weird ape like skeleton people that are like just and so,
I think the best part of this episode is the part when that one like skeletal guy is dragging the pig and he's screaming, and you're clearly something bad's about to happen, but that tension before it happens is so good.
Yeah, I like that too. Like you could you tell like they could tell something is going wrong, and then Spear's like, "Oh, okay, what's going on?" You know, and you're on the ride with them. So that was all good. Also, like with that guy, when Spear gets taken, there's a moment where like the skeleton man picks up the spear, and just looks at the camera like, "What do I do with this?" And I feel like that's like one of the rare moments of like out and out humor in this show. It's interesting that like comedy isn't exactly something that this show is aiming for, but I think it does a good job of sprinkling it in every once in a while.
The best comedic moment in the show happens in this episode. It's when Fang is trying to get to Spear at the top of the like mountain thing, and they jump up and claw into the mountain.
Oh,
and
you
like,
found that funny? I was heartbroken.
And there's that moment where like the dinosaur like where just like it like there's a freeze frame and it just slowly sinks down and like the head's like at a 90-degree angle, and I'm just like, I don't know what it was about that scene of the animation. It was just so funny to me because it was so cat-like, and it was so just like like it looked like there was like the grasping of the claws and then the slow realization that it wasn't enough.
It was a good moment. I did enjoy that as well.
And even, like, but even in the action, there's some like funniness to like the symmetry of it. Like you mentioned, like you enjoyed like Spear like jumping on the bats in the air. And, like at the same time that's happening, like Faye is jumping on bats' heads on the ground too. This is like the timing as well also helps a lot. Be like, oh, this is cool and awesome.
Yeah, like Fang definitely at times like imitates Spear, and it's really funny. Like Fang tries to do things like clearly there are times when like Fang will attack something, and it's clearly he's trying to imitate Spear, and it's just really good.
Yeah,
really cute.
While we're on the topic of comedy, also like there's this moment in the last episode where they find this oasis, and it's like peaceful, but like also there's this moment where Fang sees a worm and he's very afraid of the worm, and Spear's just like grunting at him holding the worm like, oh, like why are you afraid of this? I'm just gonna
come
eat
here, like see that it's not harmful.
And, like, it's like a comedy routine, but it's being done in grunts and
it's closest we get to actual dialogue in the entire show. It's just it's very good.
Yeah, so I really appreciated that moment before the shit hits the fan, but like that all was very nice. So just while we're on the topic of comedy there. But with Terra Under the Blood Moon, I definitely think is a very strong episode. You already mentioned that this was your favorite, Sarah, but is there another thing from the show that you want to specifically talk about?
I wanted to talk about episode 3 because I think this is the worst of the bunch. I think this is the one that
I would agree.
Yeah, and I think and I kind of want to talk about why, because like I think that's interesting because I don't think this episode's bad, but it definitely is like the one that, because we haven't touched on it at all. We haven't even talked about anything from this episode. Right. I don't think. Like, and I think that's interesting because like there's a lot going on here that I think works. It's just kind of slow. Like there's this long
like a mammoth.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like, and I think the most interesting part of this episode is it's really shot as if the mammoths are the heroes of the episode and that Fang and Spear are the villains. If you watch it, like it starts with the mammoths and it starts with the one losing the other mammoths, and it's always from their perspective until Fang and Spear kill the mammoth, and then it switches to the people we know, and then again we get the other mammoths, and it's from their perspective again, trying to fight the people that killed their friend. And I think that's interesting, and I think that's an interesting way to shoot an episode. It's just unfortunately the mammoths are a lot less expressive than our main cast, and like it's harder to connect to them. Like I do by the end, but it takes a long time to get there because they're just so alien to us, I think.
Yeah, it's almost like they're trying to like introduce a new character.
Yeah.
But it's like a character that was unnecessary. And I think that I agree that it's not a bad episode, but it was weak for me as well. Because it's just so very slow. I had a hard time like paying attention simply because I think what, like, going back to, like, the sound aspect of it, like, there wasn't a whole lot of sort of, like, ambient sound to keep me also, like, paying attention. Like, I just found that I was just kind of, like, wandering within my own mind, and then I'd be like, wait, what's happening? Like, where did this kid come from? And I'm like, oh, we're in a flashback. Got it. Like, so...
And I think that's all on purpose. And I think that's kind of like, again, what I like I think that the snow and the sound is supposed to be like, you're supposed to feel like you're lost in the blizzard with them. Like, you're supposed to feel like there's no real clear objective to the music or like you feel lost in this whiteness, but it also means that the actual visuals and music are just a little bit kind of muddled for me at least. Like, it just feels like it's not as exciting to watch a blizzard of white, like, doing nothing, you know what I mean? Than to watch, like, the Blood Moon with, like, all those weird formations of the rock and the bats flying through the air. Like, it's just so much weirder and cooler.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that also, like, because this episode, like, every other episode is kind of, like, balls to the wall, like, from start to finish. So it's going very quickly, like, there's a lot going on, but then we get to, like, this episode, and it's literally in the middle of the episodes too, and it's sort of like we're like at a sprint, and then we immediately have to stop, is kind of how it felt for me. Like, I had to watch it twice because, like, this is the only episode that I watched twice because I watched it the first time and I was like, I don't remember anything that happened. So then I had to go back through and watch it again. Which then I was, like, frustrated because I was like, ugh, like, no wonder I wasn't, like, paying attention. But again, not because, like, it's a bad episode. I just found myself just not paying attention because I wasn't necessarily, like, too invested in the story.
I think it just it plays on all the show's weakest elements, I think, is kind of what I'm saying. Like, it just, it's there's not as much of the emotional connection between Fang and Spear. Like, there's not really any part of the episode that's about them. Like, they hunt down a thing, but like they have a like solid relationship in that episode, and neither of them really get hurt except for Fang near the end, and there's not really anything done with that. But like, 4 has Spear getting lost and Fang trying to find him. Like, 2 has their relationship's all about that, and so is 1, and 5 is all about their relationship in a lot of ways. And 3 is kind of one that's not, and I think it's weaker for that because I think they're the star of the show, their relationship.
Yeah. I would definitely point to that as the key as well. That one has the least Spear and Fang, so it makes sense. Like, this would be the
especially
lesser of the
when
episodes.
Especially when the show is about like the 2 of them at this point,
right?
You know?
And I would also agree that this kind of takes a different tone from the other episodes. Like, I would compare this kind of like a nature documentary almost, because we're following the mammoths for so long, and we catch back up with them at the end, and we see their burial ritual, which at this
the elephant graveyard.
And here we see the mighty mammoth.
Right, like it's kind of like begging for narration. It's like, what am I watching?
But I think the biggest part is that all that stuff is cool. Like, I think all this stuff all the elements of this episode are cool. It's just I think they just focused on the wrong stuff. Like, they needed to focus more on Fang and Spear because we care about them.
Right. It doesn't fit with the rest of the product, and so that's why it kind of brings it down. But like, it still looks really, really nice. Like them taking down that old mammoth together.
That was a
pretty
great
cool.
fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's still some good stuff to mine out of that. But yeah, probably the weakest episode. I already talked about that beginning of the last episode where it's just like peaceful nature noises and
honestly,
lots of color, lots of silence. It's nice.
Despite how much I loved episode 4, I think that scene might be the best scene in the show. Like, it's just so good. It's just that quiet scene with them like chasing butterflies and going fishing, and just like it's just this breath of relief. It's just this like release of tension for maybe like half the episode, and I just loved it a lot. It was the perfect way to set up the action at the end.
That made me more anxious because like I knew something bad was going to happen, and I was just literally waiting for it the entire time. I was like, oh god, like this is a beautiful moment. It's gonna get ruined. How is it going to get fucked up? Like who's coming? Like
yeah, and definitely that's hard because like when you're watching media, like you have to decide whether you're gonna be like, am I gonna try to read the media or just like enjoy it as it's showing stuff to me? Like, and that's like a struggle, I think. And I think like I got better into the mindset of this is just a fun moment. I'm gonna enjoy it, and I got there. But then as soon as like the shadow showed up, it was just really ugh. Yeah, like it was just like, oh no.
I think I was right in between. It's like, I know that the title of this episode is Rage of the Ape-Men, but is it possible that this entire last episode is just them being able to relax finally, and I get to watch this? Like, wow. I kind of
get to have a good moment with these characters.
Yeah, it's like, wow. Like I never get to see like the epilogue episode where I just see the characters relax after a full show of violence and terror. Like, this is great. Of course, like the second half of the episode gets back into wild, violent stuff. But like that first scene just feels very, very relaxing, and it feels rewarding in a way after having gone through the first 4 episodes. So just the placement and the fact that, again, the usage of silence and like only using like the noises of nature, like a random bird caw in the background. I think that benefits a sequence like this.
And I think the best moment of the scene is just like, because I think the best part is like they could have easily had them just get like knocked out when they were sleeping together on the beach, but they took the time to make sure that the audience knew that like Spear was going to tease Fang, like he was going underwater to play like a prank or a joke on Fang, like to jump up essentially, and like the show made a point of making sure we knew that like this was going to be a fun moment, and that fun moment and their relationship was ruined in that time that he was underwater. It was a great like transition between there. Like it was a transition like between like water and air. Like it was just a really well shot scene. I think it was really good.
Yeah.
Oh man, when you put it like that, it's so poetic.
He
goes underwater and the relationship is ruined forever.
Well, because they even do like that sort of like, because they show him like above the water. They show Spear above the water, and you can see like the rock and like where Fang is. But then as soon as he dives back down, you go down with him so that you can't see what's going on up there. And as soon as that happened, like I don't like that I knew what was going to happen, but like I was still very much in that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, like Fang's gone, even though like I already knew, but like just that small like motion of us going down with him and then coming back up like was very, very effective
with him.
Yes,
and we were trapped down underwater waiting to see what happened, just like Spear, and just added the tension. Like watching this show, it really made me realize like I've always related Genndy to like fight scenes, and I think that's kind of wrong. I think Gendy's just really, really good at tension. Like because Castlevania is a fight show, and like they have amazing choreography. Like For Love, Alex is fucking incredible. It's one of the best episodes of TV like ever, and it's just like 20 minutes of action. It's amazing. But this show's like the action is good. Like it's serviceable. I think like the choreography is fine, but what really is the star here is like the tension of not knowing what's going to happen next, the tension of what is like going to happen to the characters, and it's just so addictive and so stressful at times that Genndy is just so good at it. And just the tension here of the camera rising above and just not knowing what we're going to find when he gets up to the rock, but just Fang just disappearing is just so good, and I think that's why I don't really like episode 5, like the second half of episode 5 as much, because it's just so clear what's going to happen at that point. There's no tension because you know that like you know the general trend of the episode at that point.
I mean, it's bold of you to say that you knew there was going to be a circle of gorillas battling each other for the right to destroy the dinosaur.
Like, I just knew like they were going to fight their way out, and I didn't predict the Fang dying, but like I did know that they were going to fight their way out and they'd be fine. Like, I think that's the problem with episode 2, right? There's this episode 2 as well. Like, there's no tension there because we knew what the storyline was. But episodes 1, 3, and 4, like, at least there was that tension there. And I think 3 has the tension too, despite what we said earlier about it. There's still that tension of what's happening, what's going on next. And it's Genndy is just so amazing at that tension.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, you say Fang is dead. Is Fang actually dead?
I mean, it's possible he's not. Like, it's possible that he's just hurt, or Fang's hurt.
That's
April,
true.
Do you believe?
I mean, kind of. But I also, like, fully believed, like, that, because I also didn't know that there was going to be 10 episodes. I thought there was just the 5.
Yes.
And so I was like, well, I already know how the show ends. They're both going to end up dead. Like, and so, like, I was glad that I was proven wrong, but I was upset because, like, I don't know if Fang survived, which makes me sad. So, but again, like, I guess, like, that, I'm, like, because I was, like, whenever I found out that there was 10 episodes, I was like, well, then why did we only get... Yeah. But
I mean, I found out on my head.
Yeah, but in my head, I was just like, well, why did we only get 5? And then I was like, oh, no, because, and whenever Sarah was talking about, like, the tension, I was like, oh, no, this is tension because I don't know if Fang's alive or not. Like, I'm pretty convinced that, I'm pretty convinced Fang's dead, but, like, who knows? We could come into episode 6 whenever that is, and, like, Fang's alive. Maybe not in the best shape, but it could happen, so...
I guess there wasn't a lot of tension for me because I thought the last episode would just be some kind of like sad moment, and then it just cut off suddenly for me, and I was just like, that wasn't what I was expecting, but it wasn't a tension moment for me. It wasn't like a, this is tense, this is strange. Like, it was more just like a, wait, that's it? I was a little confused because I thought this was the series finale, and now, like, I have to go back and maybe I need to watch like at least like the last part of that episode again just to see what my feelings are now, because it colored it very much that I thought that was the last episode.
Well, I will say for a moment that I think is meant to be very emotional, the fade out was way too quick. Like,
okay,
he puts his hand on Fang and then it just fades. Like, there's not even like a wail or a cry or anything. Like, it's just his back. So we needed more emotional angst, is my opinion.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, but eventually we'll get around to it. So whenever those next 5 episodes air, probably next year. Just some other related info to put here as we begin to wrap up. These first 5 episodes aired as a movie together in Los Angeles earlier this year, so it is eligible for a Best Animated Feature Oscar nomination. Anybody want to put early bets on this actually getting nominated?
I think they're also making aren't they making another movie compilation of this? Like, isn't that a thing they're making?
Well, it's the same, which is just the 5 episodes stitched together.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, so
I would love to see it at least nominated. I think it was, again, I was like pleasantly surprised with, how this show turned out, and I think it's very like artistic and, Oscar worthy.
Yeah, like the thing that I thought, like, when the first episode is like, this would make sense as like an Oscar nominated short. So, like, I could this is like the kind of movie that gets produced as a short, like a one-off thing. You get your Oscar and then you move on to other stuff. But this somehow got a bunch of episodes. And maybe it'll get an Oscar, who knows.
But that was smart to sort of like, I guess, premiere it as like a movie and then break it up into the 5 episodes. So
yeah, I do wonder, like, if if we ever got the chance to watch this in the theater, like how well it would blend together. Because I mean, April, you watched it all together, so I guess you have a better idea on this. I watched it night to night, but like, do you feel that this would work as a movie?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Because I watched the episodes, aside from like the first episode into the second episode, I watched them all sort of back to back to back to back, and I purposely skipped over end credits and everything just because I was eager to get into the next episode. But I could see it being stitched in. The cuts might seem a little harsh between the episodes. But I also wonder too if maybe there's not material that was cut out to serve the purpose of making individual episodes, like maybe just small transitional kind of things, if that makes any kind of sense.
All right.
I actually have the opposite opinion because I watched pretty much all these together. Pretty much
Oh, okay.
I watched all but the first one together too, and and I think that it's just each episode is such a contained unit with such a contained story and arc that I don't think this would work as a movie. These are 5 arcs. There isn't one real story arc here, because after the first episode, they have to have there's an arc about them working together, and then after that, the next 3 are just Fang and Spirit are buddies. They're together. There's not more of that. There's no more of worrying that they're gonna fight each other anymore. It's I don't know. It feels like they clash so much, but I'd have to see it. I'd have to see what they do to make it a movie, because I feel like Genndy would do a little more than just stitch them together.
Yeah, that's why I said I feel like there's probably material that serves the purpose of combining it all into one, but again was sacrificed for having individual episodes.
If it was anyone but Genndy, I would say that's crazy, but it's Genndy and he totally would do something like that.
Oh yeah. That's why I'm I feel like there could be things that I'm missing out on too. Just small pieces of stuff.
And it's a little ironic since, the last season of Samurai Jack, it was initially proposed to him as a movie, and he fought for it to be episodes. So now his episodes are turning into a movie, so it's all full circle in the end.
Yeah.
He's look, I'm giving you what you wanted.
I wish I had brought up Samurai Jack, so I remember now that the first half of that season was really, really great.
Oh.
And the second half was really... It had some problems.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping this show doesn't follow.
See Overly Animated Podcast coverage of the last season of Samurai Jack for more details.
Yeah.
That show is frustrating because there's some really amazing moments in it.
Right.
Specifically, I think episode 4, the snow fight with all of the daughters. That is one of the most incredible. Yeah. It is such an incredible episode of television. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple things that upset me, but it's not time to get into that.
Right.
Different show.
Different show.
Yeah. I just briefly also want to mention that aside from Primal, also Tartakovsky is signed up for 2 movies with Sony Pictures Animation. One of them, which is an R-rated comedy called Fist. And I want to describe to you the synopsis, just because it is very stupid. But it's Sony Picture Animated's first R-rated comedy with Tartakovsky once more on board to direct. Dark comedy Fist is the story of an average dog who learns that he is going to get neutered the next morning. It's really funny and heartwarming. It's not all about balls. We're trying to make it a character comedy, Tartakovsky said. Your thoughts, Sarah?
When you say it's not all about balls, it makes me think it's all about balls.
It's an R-rated comedy that's not about balls, Sarah. Believe him.
Okay, this makes me feel like we're gonna get Sausage Party 2.
Oh man.
But it's Genndy, so maybe it'll be better.
Who knows?
We don't know. What extent is he working on these projects? Is he just
He's directing them.
Oh, he's directing this.
Directing.
Oh, God.
Oh.
Yeah, and he is also directing a movie called Black Knight, which we have less information on. We just know it's an action adventure epic.
Black Knight sounds so much more like something Genndy would make than this ball movie.
Right, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because it's imagine going from Primal this, which admittedly would be R-rated-ish because blood, but it's a very artsy movie with dealing with cavemen and stuff, and it's trying to deal with it artistically. So then going to a comedy that's gonna talk about balls. I mean, I don't know. It's quite a turn, but
I don't know. it's just weird.
He's really trying to see what he can and cannot like succeeded. Like I feel like he's really testing himself. He's like, all right, so I made this like slightly successful, like I made all these other successful shows. I'm going to make one where there's no one talking, and now I'm going to make something about dogs getting neutered. Yeah.
Also it kind of speaks to an overall discussion we've had on this podcast before about like the future of adult animation, because it is getting more and more they're giving more and more opportunities to animation to be aimed at adults, so that we don't have to have animation limited to the children's medium anymore. But there kind of seems to be two directions where it goes, and Genndy kind of is demonstrating both of them. One is either you go for full blood, like Primal, Castlevania, that kind of stuff, or you go for sexual deviance, as in Fitz and other shows like Big Mouth. Those kind of seem to be like the two directions that adult animation so far has leaned toward, which, you know, I mean, there's more opportunities, so you will get like cases like Primal that stand out in those, but also like you have to wonder, like, could we be doing more?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it seems like the trend for adult animation is that it has to be like some type of extreme. Like, you know, there's Big Mouth, which, I mean, granted, I've only really watched like the first episode, and I didn't enjoy it just because
it gets worse. The
Yeah.
first episode's like the least bad, probably.
Yeah,
It gets worse.
and so I'm like, but like that is at a very extreme like area, and then like you have BoJack Horseman, which is like a very extreme and a completely different direction. And so it seems like adult animation is like these very extreme. So, okay, Primal, like it's violent, but I wouldn't sit there and say that, like, I wouldn't use the term violent to describe the show if someone asked me about it. I would just say, oh, like, it's about like this caveman and like him trying to survive. He has a dinosaur kind of companion. Like, it's really action packed. Like, I wouldn't say like, oh, this is extremely violent. So, but again, like, I guess circling back down, like it's always like an extreme with adult animation. Like you have Rick and Morty, which is completely off the rails. So in a sense, that's kind of an extreme. So
Rick and Morty's definitely an extreme. I don't think that's crazy to say.
But again, like that sort of serves like, you know, like kind of to what I'm saying. Like we only get these extremes with adult animation, and we haven't yet kind of figured out how to like taper it down. And really nail it. I guess maybe, like, in my opinion, this show gets close just because, you know, we're not, like, making crude jokes. You know, yeah, there's violence, but I think it serves the purpose of the story and the plot. So I don't know. Like, it seems like we're just trying to figure out what it is that we're doing.
Well, I think you bringing up BoJack is like an example of maybe because that hits an extreme in terms of the emotional drama, I would say, and like it has its sexual jokes and it's doesn't really do violence, but like mostly on like the sexual.
But
stuff.
It's also clever,
right? And so like I think that BoJack is an example of like how to use adult animation to the abilities that it allows you to, but while still being like a very entertaining and thought-provoking form of entertainment. I think that movies haven't quite gotten there yet. Like we're still stuck in the sausage party level and fits in terms of like adults animated. But hopefully TV has gotten to a place where like I think we're beginning to get like, you know, smart adult animation, and hopefully we get that in the feature film category as well. And I think that Primal is also like a step forward in the right direction.
Yeah, I think like Primal, Final Space has really good moments too. Like, so I think we're getting there, but maybe we just quite haven't nailed it yet.
Yeah. Sarah, any final thoughts on this or on the show in general?
Just that I think that it's kind of interesting watching the kind of trend that's happening in Eastern and Western animation in terms of like what's really the way I kind of see it right now is Western animation is really trying to find its feet in like trying to understand how to like tell adult stories and get people to be interested in that, like, and get people to not think that cartoons are like for kids. And I think it's a struggle in the West specifically because a lot of people don't watch a lot of stuff unless it's like Family Guy, and it's like, oh, we can watch this, but we can't. But they're not like my parents, for example. Like, they like dramas and serious shows, but they don't watch BoJack because it's an animated show. And I think it's a pretty common trend in Western media and in the Western world. And I think I think there's a lot of like differing styles and a lot of differing, like, I think there's some argument that like there isn't a lot of difference in Western animation, but if you really look at it, there's like no real like trend between any of the shows we're talking about, besides like the creators have similar trends between their shows. But like there's a lot of differences there. There's from CG to 2D, Gendy's like really artsy to like just to any other show. Like, it just doesn't look like Gendy's stuff. It's just, but they're really trying to reach for that like adult storytelling and get that across to the audience. Like, hey, we can do this over here too. And I think the inverse is happening in anime in the Eastern audience, where like they have these serious storytelling moments, but it's just very hard to like differentiate yourself when all the styles kind of have this. It's not like every show looks the same. It's not like there's.
It's a very specific style.
Like, if you see an anime character, you know it's an anime character. Mm-hmm. You just know looking at them, like, this is an anime. There's a style to all the shows. And I like that. I think there's a little more happening with anime, that they're like drifting away from that, because like I just think there is. They're trying to make for different, like Promised Neverland, even though it still has the same like human character models that look very anime-esque, like the rest of the show has like an aesthetic that just really puts itself different from other anime. And I'm not saying that like to be bad or like saying all shows need to do that. I'm just saying it's very strange that every single anime has this same style that I can recognize instantly. And I don't think that's to its benefits, because it becomes hard to just look at a show and say, hey, I might like that, because you can't be sure. Every show looks similar. And I think that they're trying to. And I think some anime are kind of realizing they need to separate themselves from the pack, not just with storytelling, but with some amount of visual design as well.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I think the other thing to add to that, too, is that because there's such a stigma in Western animation that it's only for kids, it makes shows like, because like, we're obviously not children. And so for me, like, it makes shows like Big Mouth hard to swallow, because the entire, like, all of the characters are children. Yeah. And it's an animated show, but then they're like sitting there and they're talking about puberty and sex and, whatever. And so I think that, like, I think it's great that people enjoy that show, but I don't think that
that's like another time. So I don't think it's great.
Yeah.
But we'll do.
but what I'm saying is that I think that like sometimes like shows like that sort of don't help adult animation in the Western like world and culture, just because it's like, oh well, the only shows like the only shows that are for adults that are animated are Family Guy, like The Simpsons, which is a completely different like story, and then like Big Mouth, and that's it. And then shows like that are really good, like Final Space, BoJack, and I would even put Primal in there. They get overlooked simply because they're then associated with Family Guy.
Yeah, and then it's a struggle. And I think the other thing is that like they how do I put this? Like they go for gross because they want to be like, we're an adult show. We need to be gross or gory or sexual to make sure people know we're aiming for an adult audience. And like, there are plenty of anime I've watched where it's just like, there's nothing like, it does find hard with like some of the fan service stuff, but like there are shows like if you've watched, some people know because they've watched it in this crew, like Given is a show that just came out last season, and it was really amazing. And it was just this adult storytelling show with no real like sexual elements to it. There was like romance, but it wasn't anything like gross or crazy. And like that's normal for anime to have shows like that. And I think like adult animation here, it's just like you need that like Rick and Morty factor. You need that BoJack, like we're all drunk and we're crazy factor. And I don't think, and I don't need that. Like I don't need that to connect to the characters.
Mm-hmm. And I think that might be like why that could also be like part of the reason why like Genndy did Primal the way that he did. Like the characters don't speak. They can't, like, this show can't rely on that type of humor in order to be successful. And
But I mean, it's still crazy gory.
yeah, it's still, I mean, there's a lot of violence, but I wouldn't say that, well, I guess Samurai Jack's like a hard example to put it up against of his previous works, because Samurai Jack started on Cartoon Network and then migrated over into Adult Swim, especially in its final season. And so I think that's kind of like, it was like Genndy was like experimenting with like Samurai Jack. He was like, okay, I'm going to start this show. It's a kid's show. But as it gets older, it like, so is the show. You know what I mean? Like the audience is going to change. And so he really almost kind of like pandered to that. There were parts of like the final season that weren't necessarily the best, but I think that was also just him sort of experimenting and finding his stride with it. So, and I think Primal is just like, sort of like the expansion of that, in my opinion.
Oh, all right. Thank you guys very much. I think that was a good and useful discussion.
And Alex wants to go to sleep.
Animation. And I thank you, listeners, for following us through. As you can tell, we've covered a lot of different kinds of animated shows on this podcast. So if you want to learn more about the other shows that we cover, you can do that at overlyanimated.com. You can also join us on Discord if you want to chat with us about Primal or any other animated show out there. You can find us at overlyanimated.com/Discord. Then you can always support us financially via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all of our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Katrin, aka Katrin. Thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Ryan, Steve, Beatrice, Hugh, Michael, and Needle. Besides this show, in recent times, April, you may know her from her coverage on Miraculous Ladybug. That has been a very busy show recently. I have not caught up, but I've heard that there are some very explosive episodes, so you can hear them talk about that. We've already mentioned shows like Final Space, Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman. We cover a wide variety of adult animation here, and you can find our thoughts on those shows on the podcast. Yes, Sarah?
And the most important thing is Ruby's about to come back, and that's going to be. I think that's honestly the most fun coverage that I have. It's a very unique coverage.
And I very much enjoy Miraculous Ladybug coverage.
Yeah.
That's really fun too.
Yeah, so like I said, Ruby, Ladybug, Primal, all really, really different shows, but
they really are.
They are all animated shows, and thus we cover as much as possible, as much ground as possible on this podcast. And we will be back if they end up airing these other episodes of Primal that are allegedly out there. We will come back to cover them whenever. But until then, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.